Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Chad, and I'll be the light leader for today. I always appreciate our regular presenters when you put one of these together because it is deceptively time consuming to put this together. So I appreciate the people who are our regular presenters. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown, we welcome the full diversity of our community through these doors in service of fulfilling our commitment to the 7 shared principles. We are a community where all are invited to bring their whole selves, your doubts, your beliefs, your joys, your struggles, your questions, and your hopes. Here we honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person and celebrate the diversity of thought, spirit, and background that enriches our shared journey. Whether you are visiting with us for the first time or have been part of this community for years, you are welcome here just as you are. May this time together inspire us, comfort us, and call us forward in love and justice. Today's topic. So today we are having a shared discussion examining our relationship in a monthly series of seminars. Today is discussion based on justice. Everyone is encouraged to share their voice, their perspective, and their experiences so we can further this collaborative understanding and join in our commitment to action rather than a common creed. With a topic like justice that may feel strained, especially in recent weeks, it is important to remember that here at UUFP, we are providing a safe space where everyone can and should share their true reactions. But we also have to go beyond admiring the problem and think about how we as UUs can move forward in implementing and influencing more just communities. So before we begin our discussion, does anyone have any announcements that they would like to share with the group? It might give a little bit of feedback, but we can click it on to share.
Okay. We went forever. I may not even have time. So I'll talk loudly. I wasn't here last week. I looked back there. I got a pair of gloves. Anyone who lost a pair of gloves, I didn't know where they were. Just announced them that they're back there. I'll put them back where I got them from, by that little box back there. If you know someone who did lose gloves, you're here.
Just hit the switch.
Yeah, you can click it on. Just
Turn it on.
I'll you all up here.
And there's the button.
Diane and I, Erica, we're having a paper crafting fundraiser activity on March 2nd, right after service. We're going to be bringing you a bunch of paper crafting materials. I'm going to be teaching one card making technique. You can come and either bring a project or just come and play with the papers and materials that we have and create whatever you want, whether it be your own membership, not membership, name tag, or green card or whatever.
Hi, I'm Linda. 2 things. The first of which is I just wanted to let everybody know that many of you might have known Dorothea Hamlin, who was a longtime member and I think probably one of the founding members here, or she was here really at the get-go. She passed away 2 years ago. I just want to let everybody know her estate did leave us $2,000. So we were that important to her. I announced that, 1, because it's income for us, but 2, for those who are working on the wills, it might be something to think about. Again, does this place mean that much to you that you can find it in your heart and generosity to leave a little to the fellowship? We certainly do not wish to be taking advantage of it anytime soon, but it's just something to think about. Secondly, I'm not sure how many of you read this month's Sojourner. As we, believe it or not, even in February, the board is looking towards the new fiscal year, which starts July 1. There will be turnover in the board, which is a good thing. It is a healthy thing. It is what democracy is all about. And with that, we are looking for some people, again, who can look deep into their hearts and want to give back to this community. The board, we have our retreat on Saturday. We'll be talking about moving forward, what our goals are, but we need people on the board to be able to focus on them and pull them through. So if you're interested, I know some people have already expressed some interest, for which I am very grateful. But please, let me know. Thank you.
John? You do the chalice with? Okay, so first we have our chalice lighting. The shorter, just here. So we light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, of the light of truth, the warmth of love, the fire of commitment. May its flame remind us of the justice we seek, the compassion we share, the community we are building together. In its glow, may we find inspiration, courage, and hope for our shared journey ahead. So opening words, which is slide 2. I just want to plug this book very quickly. If you can see it up there on the, or I was gonna say up on the board, but I'm leaving my day job at work. So our opening words this morning are from Clint Smith. He is a very profound writer, a poet, an activist who speaks out about justice in America, including racial injustice, the criminal justice system, and the death penalty. His work often focuses on the intersection of race, history, and the criminal justice system. In honor of Black History Month and our shared principle of justice, I just wanted to share some opening words that he wrote in the text, How It Was Passed, which I very, very highly recommend you read. So Smith writes, I think that history is the story of the past, using all available facts, and that nostalgia is a fantasy about the past using no facts. And somewhere in between there is memory, which is a kind of blend of history and a little bit of emotion. I mean, history is kind of what you need to know, but nostalgia is more what you want to hear. I'm left wondering if we are all just patchworks of the stories we've all been told. What would it take? What does it take for you to confront a false history, even if it means shattering the stories you have been told throughout your life? Even if it means having to fundamentally re-examine who you are and who your family has been? Just because something is difficult to accept doesn't mean you should refuse to accept it. Just because someone tells you a story doesn't make that story true. Later in writing a letter to his future son, he writes, with that said, do not feel for a moment that you cannot change what exists. This world is a social construction. It can be reconstructed. This world was built, which means it can be rebuilt. Use everything that you accrue to reimagine your world. You are not a mistake. You are not a deficit. You are not something to be eradicated or rendered obsolete. You exist. You come from a lineage of those who built this country. You come from great-grandfathers who toiled in tobacco fields amid the ever-expanding pastures of Mississippi throughout his adolescence, the other who fought a war for a country that would spit at his feet as soon as he put down his gun. You come from grandmothers who dedicated their lives to teaching in communities where the quality of one's education was subject to the whims of the state. You come from my parents who both protected me from violence and made me feel whole. You are the manifestation of unyielding commitment to overcome. I hope this world you inherit is one in which you may love whomever you choose. I hope you read and write and laugh and sing and dance and build and cry and do all the things that a child should do. And I pray that you never have to stand on the other side of a fence and know that it is a world you cannot enter simply because of the color of your skin. So now we move to our first opening hymn. It's hymn number 140. Hail the glorious golden city. I believe it's in the gray hymnal. Stand if you are willing and able. so Miss Kay helped me pick the hymns for today, but I love the lyrics from that hymn are especially applicable for today. Specifically the lyrics that say, "We are builders of that city, all our lives are building stone. All must aid alike to carry forward one sublime design." And I feel like that is very apt for this discussion on justice. Next up, we have the story for all ages, where Ms. Justine will be reading Sometimes People March. So if any of our young members want to come to the front, grab a blanket and take a seat.
On, was on also.
Yeah.
Today is Sometimes People March by Tessa Hamilton. For my family who has always encouraged me to be feisty and curious. Sometimes ants march. Sometimes bands, sometimes people march. Marching is something people do together when they want to resist injustice or when they notice the need for change. People march for many reasons. People march for things they care about and people they love. People march for the health of their bodies and their communities and the world. People march for the freedom to love and to live and to learn. Sometimes people carry signs to share their stories of resistance. People resist in many ways. Sometimes people resist with their voices. They might resist with words or with songs or art. People resist with meetings, resist with getting up or sitting down or taking a knee. It isn't always easy. Feet get tired, arms get tired, hearts and hopes get tired. Sometimes problems seem to be too big or complex. But we do not march alone. Ants are stronger together. Bands are louder together. People are more powerful together. Sometimes from feelings of fear or anger or injustice comes the hope for change. Sometimes great change starts small with a brave question. Maybe your question, a question that calls people together. And together we find the courage to march.
Now we sing our children off to our. From food demonstrations and, from food donations and raffles, to UUFP gear and giant cards, This little community has shown immense generosity this year. This time of year is always the anniversary of when my family started coming. And John D introduced me to this fellowship 2 years ago by telling me that we are small, but we are mighty. And the growth and stability of this fellowship is a direct result of what everyone is willing to chip in. So as John puts it, it takes your time, your talent, and your treasure for that growth and stability to continue. Today, we thank you and ask you for any donation of your treasure that you are willing to make with us this morning.
If you were a first-time attendee, we do ask for your presence only. Optional to pass a basket, please.
Okay, so in writing this up, I forgot to make the order of service, so I was able to make a quick outline off of my printout up here. But the one thing I was able to include, if you do have your order of service, is I was able to include the discussion questions. So you don't just have to read off the slide or listen to me. You can look at the discussion questions listed on the order of service and have consideration of your response. It's really important that everybody shares their voice. And the conversation can go whichever way we take it here this morning. But I just thought it would be good for you to have the questions in front of you just to reflect on any initial responses or anything that you might have. When I first started putting this together, the first place I went is to the UUA website just to see what the official mothership definition of the different principles is. So listed on the slide up here is what the UUA has on their official website about the principle of justice. So the principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations is related to the first principle, which is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It also relates to the seventh principle, which is the interdependent web of all existence. The principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relation reminds us that our actions have systematic implications. And lastly, it encourages us to create a world that is built on a foundation of peace, freedom, and justice for all people. So I felt like using UUA's official taglines there was a good place to start us off. If you advance the slide, please, to the next one. An easy way to start this discussion, how I would just start discussion in my classroom, is before we talk about what our reactions to justice or injustice that we see in the world, the first thing we really need to do is just get a definition, a working definition of justice and equity as the foundation for our discussion. And it's also interesting to think about how is justice and equity different from equality. So I hope this works because this is how I tend to do these when I'm at work. But can you take 30 seconds and talk to the person next to you about discussion question number 1? Because I think it's important that every person's voice is heard, even if it's in a small group setting. And then we'll have a larger discussion after that, if you guys are comfortable with that. So take 30 seconds, shoulder up to somebody. Discussion question number 1.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, they should just kind of, yeah.
About that today, so. It's a good start. It's a good start.
So what do you think?
Exactly. Justice varies from. Well, equity is something that, you know, again.
We'll take about 30 more seconds.
So that's the difference. I don't know, justice is above the board. Exactly, that's what people think, they say justice, and it's positive, but
You know, oh, you don't like me to see it. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's arbitrary to a degree. I mean, it's dependent, that's for different things, yeah. Exactly. And it all depends on what it is and such, a lot of times. But when it's forgotten though, it's the public level, right? See how more important it's just. Then you realize. So, yeah, no, small scale, somebody else.
All right, if we bring it back to center here very quickly.
What do you go back here?
You guys just did an excellent job and we didn't even have to like grease the skids with what's your favorite candy bar or what's your favorite cereal or anything. You guys did phenomenal. Does anybody want to start us off with a working definition of justice? Sometimes it helps to work in an antithetical, but if you know what injustice is, then it helps you get closer to defining justice. But can anybody start us off with your working definition of justice or equity, or how that's different from equality? Go ahead, shoot, sorry.
We just said it's the rules apply to everyone.
Rules apply to everyone, I love it. Sometimes when we're talking about equity and we think of the rules being applied to everyone, equity is that caveat where different people will require different scaffolds or supports to be able to be made whole, whether it's with a specific project or specific, if we're thinking like federal law level, but also just living within our community. If you could advance to slide 7, please. The second question I had here is, maybe this is like a little bit of projecting, but I was self-reflecting on this idea of the role that privilege plays when it comes to justice and equity. So how can we address this in our own lives? Obviously, I think about this a lot in my, it's Black History Month and I'm your standard white guy named Chad standing up here. So when I think about privilege, it kind of maps over justice because there's a lot of us who, for example, I don't have any different kind of thoughts if I get pulled over by a police officer or something like that. So there's a lot of ways that my privilege kind of insulates me from some of the injustices I see in the world. How has witnessing injustice shaped your understanding of fairness and compassion? Or what hard lessons have you learned in that regard? So again, is it okay if we take 30 to 60 seconds, you discuss with your shoulder buddy? Yeah. And then we can I need more people sharing out this time around.
I mean, I'll see my immigrants. Yeah, sure. Right? So I then try to. Right? However, when I first came here, and I open up my mouth and I write up my sticker accent, and they will run it. They will run it, start shooting at me, curiosity, and start asking. Okay, even so before now, you're talking about something unrelated to your job.
Sorry.
Exactly, but I am naturalized here, so, and if you're I'm doing that, and like, no, you're not. You know what, you're more, and so that starts to play.
Yeah, okay, so.
Because what is, and you know, on immigrants, how am I sending that to my past, nobody else? You know what I mean, and it's not just mine, but about my parents. But it's more so, I'm not about.
Okay, about 30 seconds.
Possibly, right, that's what my dad like. Yes, it's interesting, right. Right. Exactly. Right. I do. And it's how you ask it for, right. And. No, I, right. Yes, that's what that is. Well, and that's it. Now, like, that's what I'm saying. Because I'm saying, this is my best look. But stuff we're talking about, that's like tomorrow.
Okay, we're gonna bring it back to center.
No.
And in my formatting of this discussion, I forgot that about the inclusion of people online, so I'm gonna ask that we pass this microphone around as we have more shares this time. But you don't have to directly answer the question, but whatever cropped to mind. Whatever cropped to mind or whatever you thought was noteworthy, would you please be willing to share?
The conclusion that I've sort of come to is that money brings you privilege. I'm experiencing that right now. My husband and I are looking for a home, closer to our family, our grandchildren. And, we are finding that we could, spend easily, a comfortable amount of money and live safely in a neighborhood where I don't have to worry about being elderly and vulnerable. Or we could spend less money, we could spend less and live it in a place where we do have to worry about that. As well, the areas that we're looking into, some of them are gerrymandered. Quite a few of them. So, I see right now, we don't have to worry about that, any of those things, we feel safe and the reason is because we have, money to live safely. So, privilege.
A while since I read Animal Farm, but saying that some are more equal than others rings a bell here. I think that who's ever in charge feels like they can run over roughshod the peasantry. So
Very timely, very timely.
I started from the microcosm of my own family and I was laughing a little bit because I have observed as a parent that, when your children have much, I'm not gonna say my children are spoiled, but that might be fair of an assessment. It does not inspire generosity and graciousness and giving, surprisingly. It doesn't, like, oh, I have so many toys, so well, let me share them with you. I have so many of these things, I'm going to share them with you. And I think what is true in the microcosm in my own family, and if that's how it is for other people, then I'm gonna come over and watch, because I'd love to take it. But my experience seems to be at the micro and macro level that scarcity often brings empathy, right? So if you can really empathize with not having enough, and I think this is borne out with statistics that suggest that poorer folk tend to spend a larger portion of their income on charitable causes, for example. And I think that as society seems to, at least from my estimation, becomes more materialistic, if that is truly the dynamic, like the more we have, the harder it is to empathize with those who have less, right? To kind of, if you're in that position of privilege, and we struggle to empathize with those who don't have, and whatever that is, wealth primarily is what I'm talking about. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to change that dynamic. I certainly don't want to enforce scarcity on people because that feels wrong. But at the same time, if the dynamic is true that the more you have, the harder it is to empathize from your position of privilege. I don't know how we fix that.
So that made me think of, I was gonna include this video, but I didn't want to be like too much of a dork, but I had a video from a primatologist who studies capuchin monkeys. And he has two capuchin monkeys in separate cages. And they're supposed to bring a rock from the back of their cage and put it in a cup and they get the reward. And they're fenced cages, so they're right next to each other, they can see each other. So when the capuchin monkey on the left does the task, they're rewarded with a slice of cucumber. And they're all happy, and this is the most delicious cucumber this thing's ever had. The capuchin monkey in the cage next to it performs the same task within eyesight, and the handler rewards him with a grape. So then capuchin monkey A is like, oh, we're in the grape business now? So capuchin monkey A does the same task and gets rewarded with a cucumber and just stands there holding a cucumber like, where's my grape, basically. So Capuchin Monkey B does the task again, gets rewarded with the grape, and Capuchin Monkey A starts throwing the cucumbers at the handler, like, no, you know. I want the upgrade too, you know, we get caught looking at somebody else's page all the time, we get caught, I love how you said that scarcity, brings empathy, so sometimes when, the more we have, the less we're willing to like look around at our neighbors and see what's available to them. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a friend that I've recently connected with, a high school friend who recently reconnected with. And she's experiencing potential homelessness. And she's on the verge, and it's been very hard sitting for my position of privilege, watching her go through this, and I have so much empathy. But little things like how expensive it is to be poor. But also like we met for lunch the other day, and she lives about an hour away, 45 minutes away. And she drove there, and she said, I texted her, I said, oh, so, you know, did you get home okay? She said, believe it or not, I just got home. It took me 3 hours to get home because I got lost. And I didn't know how to answer that, so I just didn't. But then a couple of weeks later, she said to me, oh, what is that thing you put in your car to charge your phone? Like, is there some way of doing that? And I realized she got lost because her phone died and she didn't have car charging. And it's a privilege. You think, oh, everybody can find you know, wherever you need to go. You have your little computer in your pocket. And but that doesn't, that's not given.
Yeah. Excellent example, Sharon.
Yes, hi, I'm Irene. Most of you know, I'm actually a resident psychotherapist here, but over the past year, I've also been teaching at some local colleges. And my last topic at Cedar Crest was actually immigration and mental health that comes from that. So I'll speak a little bit on that, especially from my own immigrant perspective. So I think most can agree, I'm very light-skinned, I'm reasonably attractive, I'm good, right? Well, when I first moved here and I was 13, you know, my accent was much heavier than it is now. And when people first meet me, you know, we would have a conversation and I would say a certain word a certain way, and all of a sudden they would look at me with mouth agape, and the conversation would change completely. So just because I had a little bit of that accent, and you could see that xenophobia in their face, you could see that ability to no longer communicate with me very evident. And that was probably the first time in my life where I fully witnessed injustice on a personal level. And it did have an impact on my mental health, absolutely. Now, what brings up another point for me is, what if I was not Caucasian, right? What if I was not in this color, in the shape that I came here to be? How would that impact me? Okay, and so that's something I think about greatly. I think from an immigrant perspective, it's a very heavy topic now. Recently, I know a family in Colorado. She was brought here as a child, kind of like myself. Unfortunately, her family never proceeded with citizenship for her. So she was recently thrown in the back of a van with her 2 children who are actually citizens. Okay, we do not know where she is. So I'm currently working on social justice to try to find and really help her from that perspective. And it's just one of many stories. And it's happened like over the last week, okay? And this happened in Colorado, this happened in this country. So absolutely something that's going on every day. So from that immigrant perspective, what can we do to address it? I think we can address it on a very personal level, in a sense, when someone's different than us, we can give them a chance to explain who they are without making them feel like they're a curiosity, without changing the topic right away, but really speaking to them as an individual, trying to find out their voices, trying to approach them and offer services, whatever it may be, maybe inform them about this wonderful congregation that I can come to, instead of jumping and asking right away, where are you from? And full stop, okay? So that's actually very, very helpful. And also on a larger scale, I think we need to be a lot more vocal of what's going on in the country right now. And we need to get involved whatever we can, maybe even by sharing this story with someone like I am now, because it is very much happening and I don't feel like it's gonna stop. I had another friend of mine contacting me who lives out west, and on social media, and she says, I cannot talk here, I'm scared. She also came here as a child, and she's also undocumented, and you know, she's in a big place of fear. She's hiding out in a basement someplace. So it is very, very current, and I just wanted to speak to that because it is going on, but also it's my personal experience. So thank you.
To build on that, what's happened recently in the public school sphere is you may have seen local superintendents have reached out to all their staff members about different protocol involving if ICE shows up to a given public high school or middle school in the area. How the teachers are supposed to interact, how the front office people are supposed to interact. But I mean, talk about a switch flipping and like, I'm looking at my roster of students differently, like, oh my God, who's at risk here? Again, which is, you know, part of my privileges. I never had to think about that. And I think a lot of people with privilege that never had to think about that had their vote, they were more comfortable voting a given way, making no contact with the issue. This brings up, I work on a lot of equity and diversity committees throughout the years. And one thing that they always talk about is the difference between being an ally and being an accomplice. So, I mean, part of what makes this fellowship special is the way people show up, you know, like when we need people to step up for to cover RE, you know, Miss Valerie shows up when we need Miss K to play the piano, you know, people show up. Both makes delicious food. We all have our own ways of showing up, working on the sign, whatever it may be. That's more of being an accomplice, is when you show up for people to work for a cause. It's one thing to be an ally and post something on social media or whatever it be. I think the hard part, especially with a topic like this, is finding a time where of being an accomplice, where like, how do I show up? How do I actually take like an actionable step to make a difference in my local community when things are changing so fast and at such a huge level right now? It can feel like disarming, like it's too much to take on. Anyway, excellent example. As I was living in the dystopia of in the back here, as I was in this dystopia of reading the ICE email from my superintendent this week.
Just a footnote, one of the reasons for moving it is now. We had sort of planned this, but now it is more important. Because my granddaughters are in this situation. So I find myself worrying that my youngest granddaughter will be taken out of the school, carted away, you know, and imprisoned like the children were before. So we're a part of it.
Yeah, it's like a dystopia. If we could move forward to slide 8, our next is, thank you so much for sharing out. You guys are doing an excellent job. I really appreciate it. And also I love the diversity of voices that we're getting. Our next question is, how do we hold ourselves and each other accountable for creating a more just and equitable society? Because it's easy to say that that's what we want. It's so much harder to find out like the boots on the ground steps that we're supposed to take. Who are our teachers, meaning who are you learning from as you try and learn more about justice, or you try and reform what you think about justice and equity? What voices and perspectives are missing from our conversations, and how can we uplift them? So we just have 2 discussion questions left. Can you take 30 to 60 seconds and talk to the person on your shoulders or share your opinions? Let your voice be heard.
This is the biggest section.
You know, they think of my friend about my hand, citizen children, not even, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm worried. Great,
We'll take 30 more seconds.
She goes.
Okay, we're gonna bring it back to center again. And as we work up the courage to share, please remember to pass this microphone around so that people at home, if anybody's online, can hear us. So your reflections on how we hold each other accountable and who are we learning from in this example?
Yeah, and he and I and John were talking briefly, but one of the parts of voices that we need to hear from is what Irene was alluding to, is the victims of the trauma that's being imposed by our government on many innocent people. And it seems to me like we're living in a way like where the people of Germany saw the Holocaust being perpetrated on mainly Jews, who were their neighbors, presumably friends of them. They turned their faces away from it. They allowed it to happen. In fact, some of them benefited because they were able to move into a better house, better apartment, and so forth. So we can't follow in that path where it's not me that's being impacted on, but it's all of us together, and to really show the voices and faces, families that are being torn asunder by an outrageous government that's presumably acting in our behalf.
There's a quote, and I'm butchering it, but it's a meme that comes from that era of history, but it's like, at first they came for,
Yes.
and I didn't speak up, but and then they came for me and there was no one left to speak.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
just the simple voice that we
Right.
have. And living in a world where there's so many ways to amplify your own voice, you know, we all have like extended audiences in different ways on social media and stuff, so it's important.
I also think if we're having our Tuesday meetings after, with social justice, we can talk about this quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And I actually feel that people should appeal to their Republican congressmen, senators, write to them, implore them to get rid of the partisanship in this, and where we're going, losing our democracy, get rid of the partisanship, country over party.
Can we give a quick plug for that group, since it is relevant to the topic, but it's the social justice group?
Yes, it's a social justice sharing circle. It is second week, I announced it last week, second Sunday of the month. And it's directly following, well, you have a little bit of time to get some yummies and bring it here, so 11:45. And here in a circle format, and we will talk about action pieces as well as what's going on in the world today. And we'll share and hopefully come up with some really good solutions, what we can do here as a congregation, not just as a world in general.
So it's second Sunday,
Second Sunday right after service, yep.
so next week will be one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll be here.
good. Perfect opportunity.
forward
Thanks
to
for
it.
the plug.
Thank you.
McDonald.
Liz and I have our little group here, and she's named after my favorite aunt, Elizabeth. And she's part of this. I'm actually gonna start the middle of your questions here. Who are our teachers? Being, not a minority, and growing up in the 50s, my mother didn't have a job outside the house, and so everything I learned was from her. And my father, they had role models, pretty rigid about who did what, especially back in those days. But I saw the people around, and my aunt would visit us. And very quietly, she would just say things. I tend to be more, when I don't like something, I have a tough time keeping it in. But not my aunt, but I saw like quiet justice and quiet protest. And her example of writing her state senator, and my father did the same after that, about the inequity of different taxes for different things, and all sorts of things. I could go on about her examples, but I started to realize as I got older that I had a whole lot of examples, and I loved her so much, I wanted to follow her to make her proud. So Liz has two small children, and she's doing the exact same thing. She is their world. She is actually the teacher of who they will be, and her husband growing up. The voices and the perspectives that are missing is, I think we all tend, when we're not minorities, we tend to be insular, and we might have a few minority friends, but the voices and perspectives that are missing, I think, are us going to meetings and volunteering for things, and that most of them are a minority, so we can actually feel what they feel. It's one thing to read about all these terrible things that this polite idiot is doing. But it's another thing to get involved and immersed and really feel what they're going through.
Two things you made me think of. First is you are such an excellent example of travel exposure, of getting outside of our own little sphere of control, our own little comfort zone, and going to new places, encountering different cultures and stuff. You're such a wonderful example of that. And I feel like the more you do that, the more you're able to look at your own community as just a collection of different cultures that have evolved over time, and kind of drop some of the prejudices that might come in from living in one area, like how detestable Cowboys fans are, or how bad Jersey drivers are, or whatever stereotypes at hand. The second thing you made me think of is, and I feel this every day, and I think I spoke about this before when I was at the same podium, but the pressure of being a parent, it's really hard, because you want to be respectful, and you set the example that we don't overreact to this news or that news or whatever. But then they're also, if your children go to their grandparents' house where Fox News is on 24 hours a day, and then they're asking you your opinions of Joe Biden or your opinions of Trump, it's hard to be honest and respectful and say, I really don't like where this is going, which is kind of good pressure, I guess, on the parent, because it's like, well, what are you doing about it? Like, I'm not just yelling at the TV and making like a comedic t-shirt about Trump being a goof. They got to do something in your local community. Like, what are you actually doing about it? How are you changing your behavior? How are you changing the information you're accessing? I can't say enough about the book, How the Word Was Passed, that I was recommending at the beginning of this. I very highly recommend it. It is nearly impossible to read. It is so heart-wrenchingly sad. So Clint Smith travels through the United States, and it's a 2021 publication. He travels through the United States after the 2020 election, and he's going to basically slavery landmarks of the era of enslavement of Americans throughout the country. And, you know, there's red hat Trump followers there, and he's having conversations with them about what they're learning about the institution of slavery at Monticello or whatever. And he puts really candid conversations. And I appreciate like the journalism aspect of the piece, because he is just honestly interviewing people just to be like, you know, you feel so strongly about your connection to the American South and the Confederate Army and this specific Confederate landmark. And he's just kind of like, can you imagine being in my shoes and being, you know, a Black guy who went to Robert E. Lee High School? Like, what is that like? What does that tell me in my subconscious level? So I highly, highly recommend the book. Just as speaking from my own personal experience, I just really try and, I don't travel, like Mr. McDonald does, but, like I try and do that through reading. I try and like just access different voices from different groups that, you know, is outside of my general experience to like broaden my horizons. So that's part of the example I try and set for whether it's my own kids or the students that I work with, is we have to be reading about people that aren't like us. That's the best way to understand what's going on. Go ahead. It's called How the Word is Passed. And if you're an Audible listener, I believe Clint Smith does, I believe the author does the reading of the book, which some people enjoy when it's the true author of the book. One more. You're doing an excellent job. Again, thank you so much for participating. Our last set of discussions is, where do you see injustice in this local community? And how might our congregation respond? So maybe this might even be a carryover question that you can use next week. How can we ensure that this congregation embodies justice and equity in its policies, leadership, and culture? And this is kind of the hardest question out of all. What is one action, big or small, that you can take this week, this month, this year? It's very early in the year, to promote justice and equity in your daily life. What's one simple thing you or we could do? So for the last time, please let your voice be heard. It's important that everybody has a say in this. Can you take 30 to 60 seconds and have one last discussion with the person you're sitting beside?
There you go. Yeah. Yes, okay, so that's the right, yeah. And I'm not. Well, let you know. Thank you. That way, it's not, you know, like, I know the older.
We'll take 30 more seconds. Okay, we're gonna bring it back to the center. Is somebody online that wants to share?
Oh, I'll read it for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, so we have a comment from one of our online viewers. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing online.
Okay. All right, the comment is, joining email lists to try to stay informed about peaceful protests or gatherings locally near Philadelphia to support immigrants.
Perfect. Excellent.
The source did not want to be identified.
Again, from Anonymous Online, I think, thank you so much for participating online, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks. I love the spirit of being voluntold. So my name's Liz.
Justice?
No. Certainly not. Liz, first time here, but I was, as my partner said, I'm a mother of 2 young children. My society is literally just like me, 2 babies in the dishwasher these days, that's it. But I was thinking about one of the small action pieces I could actually walk out with is, where my society intersects with our larger world is where I'm really spending my capital. So spending my money in an intentional way, not supporting larger corporations, which maybe have some ethical practices or beliefs that I don't align with. Yeah. Thanks.
So you're not buying a Tesla?
I'm not gonna buy a Tesla.
That's an excellent example, I think.
Just one more thing.
Can I make
Let's- Every shopping day, if we can, a small business day, like we do around Christmas or Thanksgiving. Let's look for small businesses to say.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would wanna, a very good action I think we could take, and the fellowship hasn't been involved in this action for many years. I have been involved in it as well for many years. In the last year, I had to drop out of it, and that is to provide food, fresh, healthy food to people who can't afford it in our community. And we do that in our garden. And so I think that that is a great action. I think one of the problems with the political side of action is it's not always clear what the right thing is to do. I mean, the UUA, when called for us to defund the police department and let people out of prison, these are things that, everybody, these are things that they, should we do this? Some people say we should defund the police department. I thought that was a tremendous mistake for them to say that for a variety of reasons. But if you grow food and give that to people who need it, you can be sure you're doing, more or less sure you're doing a good thing. So that's a plug for the garden.
Just 2 things very quickly. One is school funding is an issue in our community. Pottstown is grossly underfunded, and other schools in the area are not. And this is something that's driven by a right-wing dominated legislature in Harrisburg. But I think that we can raise our voices and push for fair funding, and also legally, they can also be challenged. And then the other thing is, I'm from Massachusetts, where Republicans aren't so dominant and oppressive, so I'm not used to having to deal with them. But I can make personally a commitment to try to do my best to exercise some influence on them, although I personally do not care for them.
So well spoken. One thing I wrote down when I was thinking about the question is, and this might be something for our social justice group to do, but it aligns with the first online comment that we had, but it's just identifying like who the local movers and shakers are, like what grassroots movements are taking place here that are efforting to bring about the change that we want to see. I'm not from Pottstown. I drive into Pottstown on Sundays for service here. So just kind of, I guess, familiarizing ourselves with that local ecosystem of who the movers and shakers are. If you want to call them activists, and just find ways of promoting their work, spreading their work, supporting their work, showing up when they need the hand.
Just John Dreesen, I'll make just one general comment, but I've held this up. During the first Trump administration, the people who would be most able to know to test the environment, the one group that can do that, and those are the survivors of the concentration camps who've been celebrating that recently, who are diminishing, of course, in number because they're dying off. But I do recall that those people, some of them did reflect on the fact that they felt very much in the Trump administration that they were in 1935 Germany or a little bit earlier, as Hitler was beginning to consolidate his hold, as people didn't realize until it was too late, until the Gestapo was well established of what they had lost. So it's a chilling comment, but again, there's no other group of people who can really reflect as accurately upon what they sensed happening. The only group that is around with those people. And so we ought to, they're dying off, may not be many left to feel that way now, but I think we should take that with, a lot of serious consideration.
I think one thing that is like glaring to me right now is like how much one vote does matter, because I can't imagine, like the aforementioned email that's sent out from each superintendent about how the schools are going to approach interactions with ICE. And some schools have even gone so far to like provide informational packets that the guidance department is supposed to distribute to students that they think would be in danger of such an interaction. I can't imagine being one of those guidance counselors who voted for this to be enacted, that then now you are the person making contact with the issue of having to send this information home with families. So I'm kind of hoping that, and it's just me speaking personally, I do feel like we are seeing some extremes. It's hard to tell what is actually an extreme and what's not just being spoken into existence as an extreme, but I think that a lot of people in the next handful of years are going to realize how profoundly the votes mattered, and that it's really more than just like one team versus the other, that there's actual consequence from who we support and who we put our monetary support behind and our verbal support. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents though.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, I was gonna say last call. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say that I think I agree with almost everything that was said. And I think we need to take action on many levels. The political level is really important. And I admire people who are fighting for justice on the political level. I just made a comment that when, there are some problems with doing that. It's not always clear what the best action to take is. So it's good to mix that with an action like the garden I made a plug for, that is going to help people. But yeah, I think right now political action is very important, and people should go for it and fight for what I see as the injustice that is happening now with the present administration. Okay.
Thank you. That was well said. Thanks for participating. As always, I mean, this is obviously close to my heart, but just focusing on how we're educating the people around us is super important, whether they're adolescent learners or whether they're adult learners, but just focusing on the way that we're educating anybody. But that requires us being intentional about where we're getting our information from. so we can accurately share it and defend it. Thank you so much for a discussion. I know it's like a heavy topic to come in on a Sunday and have to sift through, but I really appreciate that so many different people shared and spoke from the heart. Next up, we have a closing hymn, number 1008, which I think means it's in the teal hymnal. And it's called When Our Heart Is in a Holy Place.
Can I have a little bit of coaching on this song, okay, for not everybody that reads a lot of music? So you're gonna go through it 3 times with the verse. And then when you see it says coda up here, when you're going through the 4th time, we're gonna skip to the end for the finale. Okay? Just a little.
1008. When Our Heart Is in a Holy Place. With our coaching tips. Next is where we set aside time to share our joys and sorrows. We will focus on the peaks and valleys of our communal experience. So the camera and live stream willing to, Sheila, can you extinguish the channels for us? And I think I put the words on the next slide. I did. Okay, great. And I'm sorry that they're not on order service. But if you would read with me, that we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The fire of commitment, these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So I think in the context of this discussion, it's clear that we do carry this within our hearts. And it's that fire of commitment that we need to focus. Another one of my teachers who taught me kind of about the inequity and injustice in the United States is the author James Baldwin. James Baldwin is a fantastic writer, if you have not read his work. He was kind of one of the few in between MLK and Malcolm X. He was kind of like a bridge between the two. He writes really phenomenal novels, but one is called Not Light But Fire. And in that is a letter that he wrote. I think both pieces I tried to pull were people writing to kind of the next generation. So Clint Smith, the passage I read was him writing to his future son that doesn't exist yet. And this is a passage from James Baldwin. It's called Letter to My Nephew, where he's writing to obviously his nephew, who's named after him, also named James, who was about to grow up in the 1960s in New York. So this is just an excerpt. He writes, "Please try to be clear, dear James, through the storm which rages about your youthful head today, about the reality which lies behind words such as acceptance and integration. There is no reason for you to try and become like white men, and there is no basis whatsoever for their impertinent assumption that they must accept you. The really terrible thing, old buddy, is that you must accept them. And I mean that very seriously. You must accept them and accept them with love. For these innocent people have no other hope. They are in effect still trapped in a history which they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. They have had to believe for many, many years, and for innumerable reasons, that black men were inferior to white men. Many of them indeed did know better. But as you will discover, people find it very difficult to act on what they know. To act is to be committed, and to be committed is to be in danger. In this case, the danger in the minds and hearts of most white Americans is the loss of their identity. Try to imagine how you would feel if you woke up one morning to find the sun shivering and all the stars aflame. You would be frightened because that's out of the order of nature. Any upheaval in the universe is terrifying because it so profoundly attacks one's sense of one's own reality. While the black man has functioned in the white man's world as a fixed star, as an immovable pillar, and as he moves out of this place, heaven and earth are shaken to their foundations. But you do not be afraid. I said it was intended that you should perish in some ghetto, perish by never being allowed to go beyond and behind the white man's definition, by never being allowed to spell your proper name. You have, and many of us have, defeated these intentions by a terrible law, a terrible paradox. Those innocents who believed that your imprisonment made them safe are losing their grasp of reality. But these men are still your brothers, your lost younger brothers. And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means: that we shall love, that with love shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing from reality and begin to change reality. For this is your home, my friend. Do not be driven from it. Great men have done great things here and will again, and we can make America into what America must become. I really like that passage. So this is the point in the service where we transition from a difficult discussion topic to delicious little treats that are in the social hall. Thank you again for sharing your voice and participating in the discussion. Have a great day. Go Birds.